Fantastic. So we are here. It's August 23rd. And I'm Frank Neapold from NOAA, a founding member of CLEAN, and happy to be facilitator today. I've got maybe 15 minutes notice. But, you know, that's how things go. It's a busy time of year for a lot of us. It's an informal conversation. And, you know, again, just for the record, if somebody's joining us late, as in the process, we've been meeting weekly on climate and energy literacy since 2008. I still find that to be a stunning thing. You know, weekly 2008, wow. But, you know, there's a lot to talk about, and there's been movement in the field and change and evolution, and, you know, so as an informal conversation, we usually start with announcements or introductions. Does anybody know? Do we have anybody here who doesn't know everyone else here? We look like each other in the sense that I recognize all of you. Anybody else? All right, there's an opportunity. Emily, I don't recognize your name right now. That doesn't mean you're gonna be like, what? Of course, we've talked many, many times. So. Oh, there you are, Emily.
Yeah, sorry. Something's going on with my speaker. I'm like troubleshooting on it a little bit. Yeah, I'm with UPR Center for Science Education. So it's with Melissa and Tiffany and I, we rotate who comes to these meetings, split the workload. But yeah, so I've been, you know, you probably see me every month or something, maybe.
Yeah, I thought that was you, Emily, but I just wanted to make sure. So yeah. I'll let you back to your troubleshooting, but thank you for letting us know. So since we all know each other, why don't we jump right to announcements? Anything? Really?
I have two announcements, actually. One is that National Center for Science Education is starting the process of getting our evolution lesson sets evaluated for the design badge, the NGSS design badge. We've already started with going through them and making sure that they are aligned in the way we think they are, and we've received our quotes. I'm wondering if anyone has any experience with that or knows someone who has experience with that, because I'm hoping that I can pick someone's brain about a few little questions I have.
I'm not familiar with that.
We plan to use our experience with the evolution lesson sets to then get our climate change lesson sets also NGSS design badge certified. So once we're done with the process, maybe that's something that people have an interest in. The second announcement I have is that we are hiring. So we are looking for a second outreach specialist. We have a member of our team who's been here for about 6 months as an outreach specialist, and we're looking to expand for someone who has experience with building or strengthening educational networks, because we'd like to try to get our curriculum in as many hands as possible. So if anyone has any leads on that as well, anyone that they can suggest who might be interested, just shoot me an email.
So, Carrie, this is literally the first time I've ever heard this terminology, design badge certified for NGSS alignment. Who's doing the certification?
It was through West Ed for a while. I think it's its own sort of branch of West Ed, but it's almost like the CLEAN evaluation. They have teams of people who go through using a rubric to see what the alignment is as with the 4 different dimensions of the NGSS, and identify places where it is in alignment and make recommendations for strengthening it. And if they find that it is highly aligned, then you get a little badge that you can say, ours meets these requirements so that we can say it is aligned to the NGSS. It's designed for NGSS. If it's not quite there, they make recommendations and you can resubmit. And I just, as this is the first time I've personally gone through this process, I just have a few questions that I'm hoping I can get answered before I get too deep into it.
Fantastic. Is that in essence like what was the certification process that Achieve was doing? The equip rubric, is that?
It is that is exactly what it is. Mhm.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay, well, that's cool. I do wonder how that is going with states and districts, and like, is that valuable to them?
And that's one of the questions I have. It is not an inexpensive process to go through. And so one of the questions that we have is, do companies who get this badge see an increase in the number of people, the number of teachers who are utilizing this curriculum? If they don't, then how much value is there to it? And if they do, what kinds of increases are they seeing?
Exactly. Yeah, that's good. Those are good questions. So,
If I might ask on that, Frank, so Carrie, would we be right on that question of the badge is another level up? It doesn't, by NCSE or another organization not having the badge doesn't mean that climate doesn't fit into, or it doesn't fit into NGSS and introduction to climate change, but it just further does it. I mean, I guess what I'm doing is clearly we want very strong evidence that, the way I like to put it is, there's one thing that NGSS, we need to teach climate change, but if you're not teaching climate change fundamentals, you're actually not teaching NGSS.
Right. So once we've gone through it with evolution, which has very obvious, strong performance expectations embedded within NGSS, the lessons that we learn from getting those certified, we then like to go in and do with our climate change lesson sets, which also has strong ties, though not as strong at the elementary level. And of course, our curriculum right now is only for high school standards. The NGSS design badges are really just a way for people to certify that we're not just claiming that it's aligned to NGSS. We have had an actual independent organization come in and say, yes, this does meet those expectations within the different strands of NGSS. It's not specific to climate change. You can have it get certified for literally any aspect of the NGSS, and it's not even specific to whole units. If you just want one piece of it, then they will do that as well.
perfect. Eric?
So we're, I think a lot of you know about the project with 10 strands, the big grant that California got. And so that project is all about aligning not just to NGSS, but to all the, HSS, math. So it's kind of a holistic approach, but we're definitely, NGSS is top of mind. So as kind of, and I've done a lot of that work too, just having been at a science center for 22 years, and all of the things we needed to have that alignment and show that. So I'm glad to just if you want have a look at stuff, or just, and we're doing that process specifically for the 3rd through 5th grade curriculum that we're developing as part of this big consortium. So it is elementary, upper elementary. And the idea is that everybody in the project is going to look at everything across all, TK to 12th grade. And there'll be a look and feel that's similar, and the curriculum will be articulated, it'll build on itself. What I like about it too is it's, like I said, it's really interdisciplinary in nature. And then just sort of at the local level in the Bay Area, my group CRS is working with a couple of districts, the Berkeley Unified School District. I just went to a meeting on Saturday, and they're kind of doing the same exact thing in parallel, but just as at the district level, they're trying to develop a K-12 environmental climate curriculum that's also interdisciplinary in nature, and centers justice, environmental justice in particular. So yeah, glad to support once you have something to kind of you want to share.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
One consideration, unless there's more to talk about, that we had, oh, there you go, Carolyn,
Oh,
was the
it's
idea
a
of,
different.
well, go ahead.
Oh, I'm so sorry. No, it'd be a different announcement. I just like, whenever
Gotcha.
y'all are done, I don't want to interrupt, but I don't want to forget.
Yeah, no, you put the hand back up. It'll help.
Okay.
Hey, Carolyn, is this idea of alignment versus it was designed for three-dimensional learning? Because often what happens is you take something that was developed 10 years ago before NGSS and the NRC framework, and you say, yep, this is three-dimensional learning. You're like, nah, really not the same thing. So if it was designed from the framework with three-dimensional learning involved in it and all that kind of stuff, how you say what this is, I think is really important. I just, because in Clean, the collection, we are looking at resources that are sometimes fairly old and they have to be transformed by a teacher. And so this idea of NGSS designed is a different thing. And I think that rubric is probably going to be looking for designed as opposed to aligned.
Yeah, and we've been using the rubric to help us as we are developing these units. And you're absolutely right? There is language there. And even like the idea of designed, right? Anyone can make the claim that it is designed for the NGSS. Having that badge makes it like official, right? It's like the crowning achievement. Which is why, a lot of people are thinking, including NCSE, of seeking that out. I think Open Syed is currently in the process of getting that as well, or has recently for their middle school. So there's, we just have a couple questions before we continue moving forward. And we're hoping to seek out someone who's been through the process, who can sort of bring some light to it for us.
Sure. Awesome. Anything else on this topic before we move on to Carolyn? Moving over to Carolyn. Carolyn, what you got?
All right. I want to start. I recognize that most of y'all are probably not in the target area, but you might have a network that is. I'm really excited. So I work for the Clio Institute. We're a climate justice, education, and advocacy org centered in South Florida, though I am in the Tallahassee office. And we managed to put together a in-person climate education, summit, mini conference, whatever it is. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link in the chat. I am going to spam the Clean listserv over the next coming weeks talking about it. So it's in person. Which is really exciting. It's not going to be just like a single strand workshop. There's going to be different breakout rooms that cover different age groups, different subjects, climate art, civic engagement, like green jobs and vocational training. Just really trying to emphasize that like climate, energy, environmental justice is not just for science teachers. And it's not just for science class. And that's really one of our big pushes, is trying to get it better integrated. So I guess if any of y'all have resources that you'd like to share, we can definitely put them into the packets we hand out to teachers. If you know folks who are living in that area and could make use of it, we'll pay them to show up. They get a stipend, breakfast, lunch, and a pack of supplies, which as a classroom teacher, I know is, not always the case and much appreciated. And yeah, I put the link there if y'all have any questions. But again, like I said, if you've got cool resources to share, I can absolutely go ahead and, include those in their like participant bags as well.
Thank you, Carolyn. That's perfect. So when your announcement comes to the network, that ask would be in that announcement so that it would prime people to, I would think we have. One thing I know the Clean Network we're trying to do is trying to build more network function. Mm-hmm. And what you're asking for is exactly that network function. Like, so AMS Education's professional development program is promoted through these opportunities, and the list goes on and on, right? So
exactly. Yeah, we don't like, I don't know if it's necessarily like, a tax rule or if it's just something that we do. We don't promote anything that has a cost attached to it. Unless there is also, I mean, if there's like a pay if you can option, then that's totally fine. But being a 501c3, like we can't promote any products that cost money.
Right.
But yeah, if there's free programs that are either online or local, then yeah, for sure we'll promote those too.
Gotcha. Awesome. That's good. That I would make that point just to, because that's an important point. Anything more on that one, Eric? You're muted, Eric.
Thanks, Frank. So we just ran a similar institute. It was a 2-day, same kind of a model for educators. There was about 30 K-12. It was interdisciplinary in nature. The focal points were a little bit of climate science, climate by the numbers, environmental justice, looking at different communities and impacts, and also environmental storytelling, climate storytelling, having the participants really reflect on their own pathway into this and why they're interested in teaching, personally interested, and also what they hope their students need to know. So we did a lot of kind of unpacking of that, and they created their story hopefully as a tool that they'll use in the classroom. So if that's, and we have a bunch of resources too, like we have an archive of about 40 online workshops, which I'll share with you offline. Maybe I'll throw my email in chat. And then the other one is, you're probably aware of the climate generation,
Yes,
the online thing in it. It just kind of came to me like after having taken their workshop and then running, which is digital, virtual, with day 3 being kind of a regional cohort model, or like for California, 10 Strands and UC Irvine, Kelly Lee, they kind of ran the California cohort, which is pretty big. But I'm just wondering if I feel like there's an opportunity to kind of pair local efforts like yours and ours in the Bay Area with kind of this climate generation model, which is virtual. And I don't know, maybe there's a synergy where the two, and also in climate generation, they noticed that they were missing entire regions of the country. Like, California was well represented. You can imagine Pacific Northwest and other regions, but then there was these large swaths where there wasn't anybody. So just kind of like, I don't know, some kind of coordination. Frank, I don't know if, like, speaking about coordinating efforts, like if that's.
Yeah, we did talk to them. Unfortunately, we had a lot of shuffling this summer and we weren't able to, we weren't really able to participate in that, although it was definitely on our radar. What we found is that we've been doing, as everyone has, quite a lot of virtual programming over the past few years. And we've just seen like attendance and participation drop off like a rock. So this is very much us trying to get back into, in-person programming. Obviously we'll be taking, the necessary precautions and everything as recommended, although apparently CDC says, just relax, guys. We don't have to worry anymore.
Right.
But I say for, especially with yours, we're going to be doing, like climate literature and telling your climate story. I will say I did put my email in the chat. So if you have anything that, could be useful to share, please go ahead and send that to me. I said, Carrie, you said you could send some pamphlets if they're applicable to Florida, if they're either, if they're nationwide, then absolutely we can go ahead and include whatever that is.
But Eric, I think your basic question, I very much support, because I've seen a proliferation, that's the word, there it is, of these smaller, more focused teacher climate change workshops, right? And so even if we had a space where we could say, here are the agendas, here's a 1-day, here's a 2-day, here's a 3-day, here's a 4-day, here are the resources that they each have, just something that. So, Carolyn, I imagine what you're asking for is a lot of work that you're already underway of trying to assemble, but the Hawaii teacher workshop and the Mid-Atlantic teacher workshop and they're similar. There are some uniquenesses, but at least you would start from the similar and build from there. So I do think it's almost like a community practice
Mhm.
kind of approach.
Yeah,
You
we
know
did.
about each other.
Yeah, we presented at the Mid-Atlantic conference last year.
Right, exactly. So, but there was a new Google folder that was made that Bart and the team made for this year's that, might be good to have access to. And I know Leon out of Hawaii did the same thing, and, and.
Yeah.
So I think that let's not start from scratch all the time because we don't have that much time on our hands. It does lead us to the announcement I did want to make for those who aren't tracking the Accelerating Climate Capacity Engagement and Leadership Summit, which is coming up in September. Please register. And the whole point is something new for the Clean Network. If you haven't tracked this, is that we say we're all about to do a year's work. If we say, here's what I'm doing, and you say what you're doing, and you say what you're doing, we might actually find areas where we could collaborate while we're doing it, not here's what we just did. And if there's areas for collaboration, not with new money and new projects and new ideas, but like we're doing similar things at the same time, maybe we can collaborate during the planning and the execution phase as opposed to the reporting phase. That's really the simple spirit of that. It'll take years to kind of get that really going. So anyway, just, if you've registered, that's awesome. But if you know other people who should be there, that keep on promoting it, so we can actually get a groundswell. This only works if there's enough people to actually prove that this is a valuable thing to do. It's just 10 hours. It's not a big lift. All right. Any other, Frank?
Okay, I think I'm unmuted.
I don't hear you, Frank. Sorry, you're muted. I'm just playing with you.
Okay, so there is a couple of announcements right at the very top 2 tiers of the chat that I put in. One goes to a couple of weeks ago when some of us met for an informal conversation. I think, Wendy, you had said that you would love to hear something of distillation of the IRA. And I mentioned that I have a friend who served on the board of Creation Justice program through Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, who's a former energy climate policy instructor director at Portland State. He's also semi-retired. Anyway, he was very involved with the DNC's climate policy, formulating that. And he was also involved with what I kind of hesitate to use the word strike team, but as the IRA was going through its last legs, he was part of a consultant group that tried to deal with whatever was coming up in terms of amendments, etc. Anyway, I've emailed this link off to Gina to see if we can get him in to speak fairly soon. He does say that he's read all 700 and some odd pages of the IRA. I can't imagine doing that. He did that on a long plane trip from Europe. Anyway, so I've got that in there. You might take a look and see what he's about. The second link down there relates to the fact that I'm on my tablet right now looking at Egypt's webpage for COP27, saying we have 74 days, 13 hours, 33 minutes until COP27. And so along those lines, Annette and I have decided not to go to COP27, although I did apply for, and as far as I know, got observers credentials, because I'm working with a group of folks here in the Portland area, as well as Quakers internationally, and some folks in Western Oregon, a number of groups to start putting together some virtual bridge activities to COP27. So one of the things I included, the second document down there, if somebody wouldn't mind accessing that link and tell me if you are seeing it as read only, as viewer only, or as um, or as editor. It should be on
You
mute.
only,
Question. I
like
have
you
to
can read
request-
it. Read
Perfect.
only.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I was looking for, because this is the version. Okay. I see it. Yeah. The dinner just got given to me to put into the solar oven, so.
Wow, that's a long time cooking.
Oh, not in 80, 90 degree weather. It does quite well. Anyway, so the document that is linked there is kind of a catalyst document that I've been sending around to various groups. That is a brief in terms of both COP27 and putting together virtual bridges. So you are welcome to share that with any groups that you think might be interested in connecting somehow. One of the other documents I'm working on that I'll be happy to share once I get it tightened up is I took the list of accredited observer groups to COP27 and have made that into a Google Sheets. The purpose of that is so folks can rearrange the list and find groups that are in sync with their particular group. So, and I'm hoping by the end of the week, I'll have that one out, and anyone wanting a copy of that, I'm happy to share it, because it may actually end up being linked off the brief. So, otherwise than that, the other thing I want to mention, particularly to Jim and Eric, is Annette and I will be traveling in between the 17th and the 30th, and we're at the tail end of September. We're planning on being in the Bay Area, and 20th and the like will be in the Denver area. So it'd be wonderful to actually see people in 3D space.
Yeah, definitely, Frank. Welcome your visit. If if it worked out to be on a clean call in person together, we could do that, or just talk shop. Or Jim and I live within like a mile or two from each other. So
great. Maybe you can recommend good coffee shops.
Definitely.
Okay.
And as far as the COP, thanks a lot for that resource document. So I am hoping to go to COP this year in a partnership with a group called Future Food Institute from Italy, who has sort of all of the logistical piece kind of dialed in. And so we would go kind of under their umbrella. But the body of work that we would present would be a series of 8 essentially interviews with, right now it's mainly folks on the Italian and European side, but we're trying to kind of work on getting presenters across the Mediterranean, using that Mediterranean climate model that I've been working on for a while. So getting representatives from those different regions around the world, having kind of an hour-long Zoom sort of interview. Everything would be centered around food security, food systems. At least it would touch on that. It can definitely the interviews will cover larger topics and ties like the Ukrainian crisis and things that are happening. But that's sort of the center point would be these, and we're going to run those all in October. So ideally, if I do go, we'd be looking for that bridge to connect with folks from the Bay Area, from ideally, especially from the Mediterranean regions, right? Get folks from Chile, from Australia, from South Africa, other parts of the Mediterranean basin. And that the cool thing, as I mentioned before, is Egypt is a Mediterranean climate zone country. So it's kind of topically a nice synergy. But at any rate, thanks for that resource. And I definitely will look at that, and maybe we can talk about that idea of connecting.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me know that you're going, and anybody else who is going or knows of people who are going, having people on the ground that local groups can connect to, that's an invaluable resource. And
Frank, and just planting the seed, I was thinking that the series of interviews that's happening in October, we're still kind of dialing in the agenda and the speakers and what that's going to look like. But I thought this venue, at least for one of them, would be really nice, you know, like during the clean call, because it's probably the same format, an hour-long structure, some kind of presentation, a Q&A period, again, tied to food systems. And as I kind of get closer to, we dial in the agenda and the topics and the speakers, I'll reach back out to both, you know, to Eugene and Katie.
Okay, cool. And Frank, just a quick question for you. Nicholas Sevenson,
Yeah,
is that a name that's familiar to you?
yes.
I
Why?
guess he used to be the manager for global outreach for UNFCCC.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just got an email from him because I had emailed him in terms of what was happening with the bridge. And he emailed back and said, there's a new guy in the new sheriff in town on that one because he's moved on to other things.
Right.
Colin Berry, I think his name is, or something like that. Is that?
So I would reach out, the people who know the most about that, just to remind you all, I have rotated off as an ACE national focal point for the United States.
Mhm.
Yeah, so much to say and not say all at the same time. But the real focus is the connection between the country and the international, not the work of the national to the international. And so
Right,
that's
right,
where I come in. My strength is what we are doing across our country, and then bringing it to the international. And that really wasn't the vision of how the State Department saw ACE national focal point. So my connections there are thin. Izati Citron and Haley Krim, both
Okay.
are deeply connected in that space. So, you know, I would work those angles to make sure that the connections are fresh and current, given the dynamism of the space.
Yeah, and I think Haley is also a Quaker. So I should.
Well, she
reach out
lives,
to her.
she can throw a rock and hit a Quaker meeting house.
Okay, yeah, but she's.
I don't know how she identifies. I've never asked her. She
Well,
went to Quaker school, I know that.
my primary reason for reaching out to Nicholas and hopefully to Colin at some point is to is A, to bring it into, I mean, there's a lot of resources that UNFCCC has that nobody's aware of.
Yeah.
That's invaluable for bridging. And I mean, not the least of which is live streaming.
Right.
But it's kind of like trying to find out in a timely fashion what those resources are is a big issue.
Sure.
So
I will
making
be frank.
personal contacts is important to me right now.
So the for those of you who don't know, this is hard to focus because you know, Carrie, that's you know, that's why you know, we do this stuff, but you know, gotta keep my focus. So Earth Day Network is has a pavilion on climate literacy, climate education. So if you want to connect into that space and all the media assets and everything that comes with that focus, I would definitely reach out to Earth Day Network. Captain Rogers and Tom Cosgrove, I believe, are the 2 points there. Haley Krim supporting the Climate Justice Pavilion as another one. And then Tom DiLiberto out of my shop in NOAA is connected into the US Center. We just saw the US Center list, and there's significant proposals. What actually ends up getting through that, who knows? But the people who are working from the United States into the COP27 space is very cloudy, and lots of people are active in lots of places, and nobody knows who's doing what. So if anything I can do to help connect some dots.
You know, I hesitate to say this since I'm sitting at my desk, but I was scrounging around for an unused piece of paper and a pen. I didn't get any of that down, so I'm wondering if you could email. Okay, good. That's perfect.
Well, I'll get you taken care of, Frank.
Okay.
Let's stick together. We're a rare breed. So now we've gotten announcements to 37 minutes. That's, you know, clearly it's that time of year. Things are getting rolling again. Topics. I know, Frank, this was kind of a topic that you were loading up, so we took care of that. What else? What else? Topics? Focus? Interest? Concern?
Well, there certainly is the IRA, but I think we're holding for when Frank's got a speaker and things. But I mean, we definitely had a lot of interest in that for some time coming up. What all's in there, what's it mean for education, et cetera, et cetera.
So I will tell you a project I'm working on right now, actually Haley Krim, the potential Quaker, I actually asked her this morning we have this project called the Inventory of All Federal Climate Education Training, Public Awareness, Public Access, Public Participation Programs. And we did not expect the IRA to happen, obviously, and it did. So, but we did include the IIJA. And so, Frank, I would include the IIJA in your things of merit, because when we started, there's something under the White House called Building a Better America. If you Google it, you'll find they did this whole like analysis of that massive bill, the infrastructure bill, and you found all these massive programs of funding in multiple departments and agencies. And there's a significant body of them that are focused on climate and things that we care about. But the IRA is it's vague at this point. There's a lot of possibilities, but until we start getting into the details, we really won't know what's in there. But it looks promising in certain places, but it's definitely not like climate change education. That didn't show up. I know there was some move afoot to get that bill in there. That didn't happen. So, I think we're stretching things to fit as opposed to they were designed for a specific purpose. It's more like the aligned NGSS as opposed to the designed NGSS. It's not as ideal as we'd hoped, but, we're going to make stone soup. Maybe something better than a stone, but but
one of the comments last week, Frank, as we were discussing this, was exactly what you said, that we weren't in there as much, but if you look for what it calls for, the screaming need for education and educated people of all sorts to execute all kinds of things is there.
Yeah.
So we hope to be able to contribute to filling that screaming need, but money would really be nice.
Well, but like Maine just put $2 million into climate change education. New Jersey did put $5 million into it. Minnesota has some. Washington State has many years of it. California has got at least 3 initiatives north of $1 million that I know of. 10 Strand, 6 million, UCI, 3 million. LA Unified might have some money directly, county district funded. It's starting to pop. If you look at Montgomery County, Maryland, Prince George's County, Maryland, Woodland Hills, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, New York. I mean, I'm starting to see this like what we've been calling for forever and be funded by federal is starting to show up at state, county, and city because they're not waiting, which is like how we connect our efforts to those efforts in partnership and collaboration is really, 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 really important right now. Frank, I see a hand.
Yeah, it is. Occasionally like to use the real thing. I want to throw something into the pot, and if we don't have time to deal with it, we don't have time to deal with it. That's fine. But it's something that's definitely been weighing on my mind. And it comes with a brief story, which is that my wife and I went up to spend a few days up on Mount Rainier. And just before that was the time that the IRA was going through its last legs to become law. And at this slightly after that, of course, we have all of the news reports in terms of the raid on Mar-a-Lago. And then throw into that the fact that on our trip up to Mount Rainier, there's a little logging town we go through called Morton. We usually stop at the store there because it's a good, decent store, but we didn't this time because the Loggers Jamboree was there this year. Well, again, they always do, but here they had sort of a public exhibit area, I guess you'd call it. And flying above that were all of the Trump 2024 flags, the Don't Tread on Me flags. And we kind of felt like, we get out with a mask, we'll probably get shot. And so this all comes down to the fact that it is incredibly easy right now to lose focus. Yeah, I mean, because again, that example of the IRA, what's going on there, and at the same time, the news being full of this information about classified documents being pulled out of Trump's summer home. So any thoughts on that would be great. Definitely something I'm struggling with.
I'm going to let other people start. Really?
Frank, you kind of talking about the idea that that's just such a distraction from the other piece? Is that
Well,
kind of?
there's a couple of things. First of all, it's the experience coming across the Loggers Jamboree was chilling. I mean, it was kind of like I wish we'd come through it on our way out of Mount Rainier rather than into Mount Rainier, because even though it was a wonderful time hiking, it was always in the back of our brain. There's all these wonderful possibilities in terms of what just happened with the IRA and so on, and a real need to just really double down on that. But then looking at the fact that anything we do is going to be met in some cases by violence.
I wonder, one of the things I mean, maybe this is tangentially connecting to this idea, but I mean, there's been so much on the news about the international, major droughts in Europe and China. Their rivers are drying up. The hydroelectric plants, are at much lower percentage of fish. They can't do the work without the water rolling through. Lake Mead is low. And so I just wonder within the framework or this, but then, I've got my echo chamber of PBS that I watch a lot, right? I'm not, so I just wonder though, these huge events that are happening in our country and across the globe have got to be shifting some kind of the mentality at some level, because it's and then, Manchin, he leaped, right? He did leap, but then they said, well, there's all these poison pills in the IRA. But then I watched a climate reality webinar Al Gore led up last week, and his essential assessment was there's so much good in this. Yes, there's some pieces that are problematic, but overall, this is huge. And in his mind, it was like this is a good piece of work. Not perfect. So I don't. So I don't know. I mean, but it's everything's still so polarized, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. We're still on this like precipice of I don't know.
Well, and in some cases, maybe we needed the poison pills just to be able to bring some of the folks from Morton and communities like that kicking and screaming along with the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
But Frank, there's another piece of this, and and when I look at the IIJA infrastructure bill and the IRA, you'll notice the analysis by policy offices, whether they're federal, non-federal, they talk about a number of jobs that these bills will actually produce. Yeah. And I think for me, when I think about the Jamboree and the resistance and the anger and the polarization, is we're in a transition. And there are a lot of people who are very, very nervous that if we transition transportation, electricity, food, water, everything to something else, how do we make that work for people's families, mortgages, college costs, medical costs? These are people we're talking about.
Yeah.
And if they're anticipating that the new way, which is a bunch of Priuses and solar panels and eating nuts and berries, like, it's like, that's a terrible world. I don't want that world, and I'm going to resist the bejesus out of it. When actually it's the thing that's going to save the economy. And it's
Yeah.
actually give more jobs, not less. They're different, so they're details that matter. But, you know, I do still think that if we ever were able to position this issue in a way that it's the best way we could build an economy, is actually one that is decarbonized and resilient
Yeah.
as fast as we can, throw everything we have at it, and you know, work the details. And there are some people that are going to have a hard time, but a offshore oil welder is going to do exceptionally well, I am incredibly confident, as an offshore you know, wind welder.
Yeah.
Same skill, identical. It's metal. You need to make it work in salt water, deep, right? You know, same skill.
Mhm.
But there's a real opportunity in this new economy. But unless we are able to actually have people feel that and have confidence and get excited about moving into that space, as opposed to just being angry and, you know, divisive and throwing Molotov cocktails of, you know, the verbal form or the literal form, right? You know, I think that until they feel that this is what we're talking about is valuable, it won't dissipate. That's just where I'm coming from. And that's where I'm looking at these bills and I see these $10 billion here, how many jobs? $15 billion here, how many jobs? In salt, you know, I think there's some material to work with, for sure. Sorry, Jim, your hand has been up.
That's okay.
I'm gonna step
Go ahead,
off my-
Mitch. I'll fit in, but go ahead, Frank. I'm not.
I'm done. I'm done. I just, you know, I think there's a way forward, but it's gonna be, it's a different than what we've done so far, for sure.
The real struggle is going to be having the conversations in the first place. I mean, everything you're saying is definitely agree with. And in terms of the anger, frustration, et cetera, that's the people I come out of, is working class folks like that. That's kind of what's scary at this point, is just the intensity and the complete inability to look beyond what they're being told. Yeah, anyway.
I've got a thought, but I want to acknowledge Jim Callahan first. I've got a thought too after.
So, I mean, you know, within all of us and what we're doing, there are people who need to talk and more have a conversation directly or relate to people who are more heavily influenced by the former president, and all the people go with that. There's definitely that. There's no need to be angry or hurling Molotov cocktails back when it's not necessary. There's nothing like that, because I guess the one is, there are those of us who do focus more in what you say, the blue states. It's not a political choice. It's just that's where we are. There's a whole thing of winning by success. I mean, it's just like when you've got what the future is, when you've got what technologically works, you know, the old argument, you don't even have to get into climate change. This is just really good economics. This is really good technology. This is really good jobs. You can be part of it or you can not be part of it. And you want to make sure it's really strong in the areas like California where it's really strong. So, I mean, it's not, I don't know, I'm just kind of acknowledging that's a little bit how I tend to enter the conversation. It's like, I don't end up having to do a lot of talking with somebody who, you know, is part of the Proud Boys. I mean, I don't talk to Proud Boys guys, and people can talk to them and things like that. But there is a thing of with the RRA. So, I mean, this might be just acknowledging something for a future conversation of the RA is what it is, and it has a lot of things in it. There are things in it that for everybody who would want to see it happen would be not hard to acknowledge that there are things that are major gaps that if they're not filled, it will not be successful. I mean, it will have the money, but I think some of Frank Leopold, if you tell me if this I'm the right track, if there's a question of who's going to fill all these jobs, right? There's going to be all this work. Where is this all going to happen? That begs the question, who's going to do that? And if the IRA doesn't really address that, I mean, it addresses it in terms of apprenticeship. And that's the thing of understanding a little bit why does it have the language it has? What's going on with it? But there is clearly not enough people to fill those jobs, and they have to be there. And I would put the thing that people heard me say before is, if it's all going to be white males, it's not going to be enough. We need the fields that these are talking about are absolutely dominated by white males. I also don't think this is an argument against white males. There's not going to be enough white males to do these jobs. It's not a matter of asking white guys to sit back and let women of color come and fill these jobs. There's plenty of this, but is this also going to reach out to young people? Are people 18 to 20, up to 22 feeling a role in this? I mean, these are things that have to be addressed, that there's going to be enough people to fill these jobs. And that's something to be pointed out that the IRA doesn't really speak to. There's another point I had, but I think I want to defer to Eric or not take too much time on this. But there's just so much of how are we going to fill these jobs?
I'm just thinking about the demographic that we're talking about. Like, and so if the vision is that you're not in the middle of San Francisco, New York, driving your Prius, or have solar panels on your roof, but if it's the folks that are sort of around the periphery of the urban centers, the ones that are part of the quote the other side, and yet they're practicing resilience if they're living on a property and they're growing their own food, and they'd be the first to say, I want to be energy independent. I want to, so I think I'm thinking about somebody I know that lives in the Central Valley, and he's politically on the other side of where I am, and yet he grows all of his own food. I mean, he's living sustainably in the Central Valley, and he brings stuff in and he shares his produce with folks when he comes and volunteers at Chabot. And so it's kind of like, it's not an us and them, it's sort of, but it's like uplifting a story, right? We're talking about uplifting stories of lots of people. Here's a group that is doing some really great stuff already. So how do we share that in a positive light? There are models and advance that. I mean, it's hard if you're living day to day to imagine the investment it's going to take to put solar panels on your ranch, right? So I get that. And what you're saying, Frank, about fear of transition into a new field, and that's what the training programs are meant to be. But I guess it's uplifting those stories too, and showing how they are actually living in a sustainable way, and in a lot of ways a model that we should think about replicating too. I mean, you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? There's not if we can get away from the polarization and figure out how to celebrate that piece, especially.
If I can I make one other little point? And something this is toward when we have a larger discussion, some of the things that I would hope we can bring in on the RA. So to kind of identify these things. There's a lot of things going on in the RA. I have scanned or gone through the 700 pages. I haven't read them all, but I've certainly gone through and looked for everything that's relevant. Thanks. There's a lot that's being said that it would be good to get analysis of why it's being said, and for us just to be informed. Okay, so one is a science educator. I really snugged up real quick on why do they keep using the term carbon oxide? That's like, is this a typo? Why are they saying carbon oxide? That's really weird. Scientists don't usually use that. We say carbon dioxide, carbon dioxide. There is a term carbon dioxide which puts them together, and I would think the reason they did that, there was a very deliberate thing. It was using language that is dealing with the way the Supreme Court has said, well, unless Congress has made it clear the EPA can't regulate on carbon dioxide. So let's put carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide together. And there's no argument. Carbon monoxide is a toxic chemical, right? So if we link it all together, it's going to be really hard from now on for someone to say carbon oxides can't be regulated. I mean, there's weird stuff going on, but I think, I guess what I'm just trying to bring up, there's a lot in there that I think we as informed science educators and climate educators would be good for us to know. before 6 months or 2 years ago before we didn't even realize that was being addressed in the new IRA. Sorry, I went on, but there's a lot in there.
But I would just encourage you all to also look at the IIJA, not just the, and even the CHIPS Act. Those three together do some really powerful things, not just the IRA. It's all three of them. So and then there's the annual appropriations that are happening on top of that. So it's crazy how complicated it is, but there's a lot of good work that's going on out there. But I do think the general principle of decrease the way to depolarization is through Ed Maybach. I was trying to look through Twitter feed real quick to see if I could find it. It was a simple recipe, right? Keep it simple if you can. Activate the alarms, educate the concerned and cautious, and don't piss off the dismissives. If you can do that, it's not a bad recipe, right? To how to approach this, because those first three is like 70% of the population. If you can do that with these three in the process of not making these guys really active against you, then they're like sub 10%. So there is a way here, but this is really what I was hoping a national strategy would do, because we're up against strategic, like we need strategy, how to align our efforts together with common purpose. That's what I was hoping that could be. Clearly, we didn't go down that road, but I still think there's space for, how do we approach these realities and get to another outcome? Because if we ever were able to create where our education systems and our community engagement systems were really rolling up their sleeves to get people fully involved in the solution, and they were employed in the solution, and they were seeing benefits from being part of the solution, man, we'd go full speed and then some. But that's really what I see. So that that noise will just go away by there's a better reality. When you start seeing people who come from that worldview driving F-150 Lightning trucks because it's just a better truck, like, it'll just tamp down. So anyway, we have burned up a good hour. It's nice to be with you all one day in person, but any last words? We just clicked over, but any last words? No. Well, it's good to see you all. Carrie, thank you for sharing the young person in the camera. That's always good. I miss
She's
it.
really camera shy, so as long as she thinks no one can see her, she's very.
Oh, as soon as we recognize, she's like, "Zoop."
Oh yeah, no. It helps that I wear headphones so she can't hear everyone saying hello to her. But yes.
Gotcha. Good to know.
You didn't see with her telling me that she wanted me to give her a cup of Nutella. I was like, no.
A cup of Nutella. That's a good one. Anyway, I better go get downstairs and take care of my kitchen aspects. So good to be with you all, and we'll pick it up next week. Take care.